Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Mental Health Matters. We're at episode number 11. And today I just want to talk a little bit about how it is that we battle the fears that we have. If we're to be honest, during this time of pandemics are really scary. It doesn't matter how you spin it or try to change it or reframe it. We're living in a time of fear. And so, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, many people are trying to figure out ways to adjust to life in the midst of quarantine, as well as coping with increased levels of anxiety or stress. So, in addition to trying to stay safe and protect loved ones and reduce the spread of COVID-19, it's also important for us to be mindful about our emotional responses to the pandemic or to all of the amalgamation of bad things that we're hearing on the news. So fear and panic in particular have the potential to get very problematic if we're not very careful about it, or if we don't plan for it, or if we're not honest about it. So how does our fear responses actually work? Fear is generally considered a reaction to something immediate that threatens your safety or your security, such as being startled by someone suddenly jumping out at you from behind you and scaring you. The emotion of fear is felt sort of as a sense of dread or alerting you to the possibility that your physical self may actually be harmed, which in turn motivates you to protect yourself. So maybe you've heard of some of these terms before. The notion of fight or flight is considered to be a fear response and describes the behavior of various animals when they're threatened. So either they are hanging around and fighting or taking off to escape danger. Yet it's also been recognized that animals and other people often have other responses to a threat. So a person or an animal may play dead or just freeze in response to being threatened. They may yell or scream as a fighting response, and rather than get physical, or isolate as a flight response. So as a result, some researchers now suggest an expanded version of the fight or flight response to namely include fight, flight, or freeze. These are the reactions that we typically have when we are afraid of things. So, what do we do with our fears? Here are a few tips that I came up with this late evening about how it is we can deal with some of our fears. So here are we. One thing that we can do with our fears is we can try our hardest to seek to understand it. What is this fear that I'm having really about? What are some of the triggers that I'm having? Something else that you can do is you can try to embrace your fear and view it as a normal part of life and living. Listen, we all have fear. Fear is natural. Fear is a natural and normal response to the things that trigger us. One other thing that we can do is we can name it or try our best to identify it. Now, when we talk about naming a fear, we're calling it what it really is. We're saying it out loud. The truth of the matter is fear, when it's exposed to the light, it shrinks. But when we try to keep the things that we're afraid of hidden, or we don't want to talk about them, or we want to act like they don't exist or sweep them under the rug, they usually grow greater and greater. So I've heard someone say one time, we wear our vulnerability on our sleeve, and so that people can't unmask our vulnerability. Instead, we're open to talking about it. What are some of the others? We can also find other people who've dealt with similar issues, and we can seek advice or mentorship as to how to deal with the fear. One thing that I think is also very helpful, and I suggest this to my client, is to try to envision themselves without the fear. If you're afraid of flying on an airplane, try to envision yourself not on the airplane, but arriving at the destination in the white sandy beach that you haven't been able to get to. If you're afraid of something else, or maybe of driving, envision yourself driving, or envision yourself doing the very thing that you're afraid of. And then, of course, we want to suggest to you that if you need help for dealing with your fear, that you get the help. But there's one more that I want to share with you, and I want to make sure that this is ingrained in you. Don't try to necessarily eliminate the fear. We want to try to reduce the fear. Fear is not a bad thing. Fear protects us. Fear makes us more cautious. So don't necessarily try to eliminate the fear, but try in your hardest to reduce the fear. And as also always, as we've been talking about this Mental Health Awareness Month, if you need help, make sure you get the help. Here's a few resources that you can utilize to help you get started. I hope this was of benefit to you. And by all means, join us again tomorrow for another episode of Mental Health Matters. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.